The sky turned green. Not slowly. Not gradually. One moment it was gray, heavy, threatening. The next, it shifted. Sick. Unnatural. Like the world itself had decided something was about to break. Martha Whitaker noticed it from her porch. She stood there, one hand gripping the railing, the other shielding her eyes as she stared out over the empty stretch of farmland. "That's not good," she muttered. At 72, Martha had seen storms. Plenty of them. Rain that flooded fields. Winds that tore down fences. Even one tornado, years ago, that missed her land by a mile. But this felt different. The air had gone still. Too still. No birds. No insects. No sound. Just pressure. Then the siren started. Distant at first. Then louder. Closer. Martha turned quickly. Stepped inside. Her house wasn't much. Old wood. Repaired more times than she could count. But it stood. It had always stood. She moved fast for someone her age. Grabbed her coat. Her flashlight. Checked the cellar door. Unlocked. Ready. All right, she whispered to herself. Just like before. The wind hit. Sudden. Violent. Slamming against the walls like something trying to get in. Windows rattled. The porch creaked. Dust lifted from the ground outside in swirling waves. Martha stepped back toward the door, then froze. Headlights. Cutting through the storm. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Motorcycles. They came fast. Too fast. Engines roaring against the wind as they tore down the road toward her property. Martha blinked. What in the world? They didn't slow. Didn't hesitate. They turned straight into her driveway. 30 bikes. At least. Maybe more. They stopped hard. Boots hit the ground. Voices shouted over the wind. And then, the first one ran toward her porch. "Ma'am," he shouted. "We need shelter, now." Martha didn't move. Didn't answer right away. Because she saw the vests. The patches. The kind of men most people cross the street to avoid. And behind them, the sky twisted. The tornado. Forming. Close. Too close. "Please," another one shouted. "We won't make it." That was it. Martha didn't think. Didn't hesitate. She opened the door. "Inside," she yelled. The word cut through everything. And just like that, they moved. Fast. Disciplined. No chaos. No pushing. One by one. Then all at once. They rushed into her house. Boots thudding against old wooden floors. Wind howling behind them. The last one slammed the door shut. Locked it. And the storm hit. Hard. The entire house shook. Walls groaning. Glass rattling. Martha didn't wait. "Basement," she shouted. "Now." No questions. No hesitation. They followed. 30 grown men. Moving down a narrow staircase. Into a cellar barely meant for half that. The door slammed shut behind them. Dark. Tight. Crowded. The only light. A single flickering bulb overhead. The sound. Deafening. The tornado roared above them, like a freight train ripping through the sky. The walls trembled. Dust falling from the ceiling. One of the bikers muttered, "We're not going to make it." Martha snapped her head toward him. "Don't say that," she said. Her voice. Sharp. Certain. It cut through the fear. And for a moment, they believed her. Because she didn't look scared. Not even a little. She stood there, 72 years old. Hands steady. Eyes locked on the ceiling like she was daring it to hold. "You stay low," she said. "Stay calm. This house has been through worse." That wasn't true. But it didn't matter. Because right now, they needed something to hold on to. And she gave it to them. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds. Time didn't make sense anymore. The noise grew louder. Then louder still. Something hit the house. Hard. The entire cellar shook. One of the younger bikers grabbed the wall. "Jesus." "Hold steady," Martha snapped. And they did. Because somehow, she sounded like the only thing in the world that wasn't breaking. Then, silence. Sudden. Complete. The kind that comes after something destroys everything in its path. No wind. No roar. Just stillness. No one moved. No one spoke. Until finally, one of them whispered, "Is it over?" Martha listened. Carefully. Then, "I think so." Slowly, she moved toward the stairs. One of the bikers stepped forward. "I'll go first." She shook her head. "My house," she said. He hesitated. then nodded. She climbed, step by step, opened the door, and stopped, because half the house was gone. The roof, torn away. The porch, gone. Fields outside, flattened. Everything changed. But the cellar still stood. She stepped back down, looked at them. "We're alive," she said. And that was enough. One by one, they came up, stepping into what was left of her home, looking around, silent, because they knew what should have happened and what didn't. One of them turned to her. "You saved us," he said. Martha shook her head. "No," she replied. "I just opened the door." But they knew better. And as they stood there, 30 Hells Angels, alive, because of one woman, something unspoken passed between them, something that didn't need words, because some debts aren't forgotten. And days later, that debt would come back, not quietly, not small, but as something no one in that town would ever forget. By morning, the silence felt heavier than the storm. Martha stood in what used to be her kitchen, staring at the open sky where her roof had been. Sunlight poured in through broken beams. The wind had died, but everything it left behind still whispered. Her table was gone, her cabinets ripped clean off the walls. The front half of her home looked like it had simply been peeled away. But the cellar door still stood. And that was why she was alive. That was why they were alive. Behind her, boots shifted on wood. 30 men, still there. None of them had left. Not one. "You should go," Martha said quietly, still facing forward. No one moved. "You've got places to be," she added. People waiting. A few of them exchanged glances. Then one of them stepped forward. "Victor Rook Hale. You think we're just going to ride off?" he asked. Martha finally turned. "Aren't you?" Rook looked around the remains of her house, then back at her. "No." That was all. Simple. Certain. And just like that, the others started moving. Not talking. Not asking. Just doing. One of them dragged what was left of a beam away from the doorway. Another started clearing debris from the floor. 2 more moved toward the outside, scanning the damage. Martha blinked. "What are you doing?" Rook rolled up his sleeves. "Fixing what we can." She shook her head immediately. No, you don't have to." "Yeah," he said, cutting her off. "We do." She hesitated, looked at the broken walls, the open sky, then back at him. "You can't fix this," she said softly. Rook didn't argue, didn't pretend. He just said, "Not today." A pause. Then, "But we can start." And they did. All day. They worked. Clearing wood. Stacking what could be saved. Covering exposed areas with tarps pulled from their bikes. One of them drove into town and came back with tools. Another with bottled water. Another with supplies. They moved like a system. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just steady. Martha watched. At first from a distance. Then closer. Then, eventually, she picked up a piece of wood herself. "Careful," one of them said. She shot him a look. "I've been fixing things longer than you've been alive." That got a small laugh. The first one of the day. By sunset, the house still wasn't whole. But it wasn't broken either. Not the same way. Not anymore. Martha stood on what remained of her porch, looking out at the fields. Flattened. Gone. Years of work erased in minutes. Rook stepped beside her. "You got insurance?" he asked. She shook her head. Couldn't afford it. He nodded slowly. Didn't say anything else. Because he didn't need to. She looked at him. "You'll leave tomorrow," she said. It wasn't a question. Rook stared out at the land. "Yeah." Another pause. Then, "But this isn't over." Martha frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. Just gave a small nod. Then walked off. That night, they stayed. All of them. Sleeping on floors. On bikes. Anywhere they could. Not one complaint. Not one word about leaving early. Martha lay in what was left of her room, staring up at the sky through broken beams. Listening to the quiet breathing of strangers who had become something else. Not family. Not quite. But close. Closer than anything she'd had in a long time. The next morning, they were gone. Just like that. No loud goodbyes. No speeches. Just the sound of engines fading into the distance. Martha stepped outside. The yard was empty. The road quiet again. For a moment, it felt like it had all been a dream. Until she looked at the house. At what they had already started. Then she nodded to herself. "Good men," she muttered. And went back to work. 3 days passed. Quiet ones. Hard ones. Martha worked alone. Fixing what she could. Salvaging what was left. Doing what she had always done. survive. Then, on the fourth morning, she heard it. Low, distant, familiar. Her hands froze mid-motion. Her head lifted slowly. No, she whispered. But it was real. The sound grew. Louder. Closer. Not one engine. Not a few. Hundreds. The ground itself seemed to hum. Martha stepped out into the yard and saw them. A line of motorcycles stretched across the horizon. More than she could count. Riding in formation. Tight. Controlled. Relentless. Her breath caught. What is this? They came down the road like a storm of their own. Not chaotic. Not wild. Organized. Purposeful. They filled the entire stretch leading to her property. Then, they stopped. One by one. Until the air was full of silence again. But this silence felt different. Heavier. Bigger. Then, Rook stepped forward. Helmet off. Eyes locked on her. Behind him, rows upon rows of bikers. Hundreds. No. More. 1,000. Martha took a step back. What did you do? She asked. Rook smirked faintly. Made a call. She looked past him. At the sea of leather and chrome. At the men stepping off their bikes. Carrying tools. Lumber. Equipment. Things she couldn't even name. You didn't, she started. Rook cut her off. Yeah, he said. We did. She shook her head slowly. Overwhelmed now. This is too much. Rook stepped closer. No, he said. It's not enough. That stopped her. Because there was no exaggeration in his voice. No show. Just truth. You saved 30 lives, he continued. We're just fixing one. Martha's throat tightened. She looked around. At everything. At all of them. Why? She asked. Rook didn't hesitate. Because you opened the door. That was it. That was the answer. And somehow, it was enough. He turned. Raised his hand. And everything moved. Like a machine coming to life. Hundreds of bikers spreading out across her land. Some toward the house. Some toward the fields. Some already unloading materials. Building. Fixing. Restoring. Not slowly. Not halfway. Fully. Martha stood in the middle of it all. Watching her world come back together piece by piece. Faster than she ever thought possible. Stronger than it had ever been. Rook stepped beside her again. You're gonna need a new roof, he said. She let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, I figured. He nodded. We'll handle it. She looked at him. Long. Then, thank you. Rook shook his head. No, he said. Thank you. They stood there in silence. Watching the work unfold. Watching something broken become whole again. And for the first time since the storm, Martha didn't feel alone. Because sometimes, all it takes is opening the door. And everything after that changes.